There's an elephant in Kenya right now that already knows whether you're dangerous. It hasn't seen you, it hasn't heard you. It just caught a trace of something in the wind and made a decision your face had nothing to do with. That's the thing that stops most people cold when they really think about it. We assume animals are reading us the way we read each other: face, posture, eye contact. But the research tells a very different story. Wild animals have been solving the friend or foe problem for millions of years, and the tools they use are so specific, so finely tuned to their own biology, that some of them are doing things we genuinely didn't think were possible until scientists started testing it. This video is about four animals that each crack that problem in a completely different way. An elephant that sorts entire human groups by scent. A crow that files your face in memory and passes it on to birds that have never even met you. An octopus with no bones, no centralized brain, and a grudge it will hold for months. And an ape that looked at a primatologist through a COVID mask after 30 years and still knew exactly who she was. Every one of these has been confirmed in the lab, and one of them, the last one, is the finding that researchers themselves weren't sure was going to hold up. We'll get to that, but let's start with the one that changes how you think about what a threat assessment actually is. Amboseli National Park, Kenya. A researcher places a piece of red cloth on the ground, upwind of an elephant family, and steps back. The cloth is clean, no one has touched it, and the elephants barely react. Then the researcher replaces it with an identical piece of red cloth. Same color, same size, same position, but this one was worn by a Maasai man for 5 days. The elephants travel significantly faster in the first minute after they start moving away. They go farther in the first 5 minutes, and they take significantly longer to relax after they stop running. The cloth is out of sight. No human is visible. The elephants are distinguishing at least two Kenyan ethnic groups and identifying them by olfactory and color cues independently. In the Amboseli ecosystem, young Maasai men demonstrate virility by spearing elephants, while Kamba agriculturalists pose little threat. The elephants have learned this, and they've encoded it in a way that doesn't require seeing a single person. Now, here's the part that makes this genuinely strange. When researchers tested color separately, no scent difference, just cloth, the elephants didn't flee. They reacted with aggression toward red cloth, but not white cloth, suggesting they associated the color red with the Maasai. Scent triggers retreat. Color triggers attack. Two completely different behavioral outputs from two different threat cues, both pointing at the same category of danger. Researchers believe the difference in emotional reaction to odor versus color might relate to the amount of risk the elephants sense in the two situations, driven by a particularly keen sense of smell. When smell is involved, the threat could be close but invisible. So you run. When you can see the color, the threat is in front of you, so you charge. The elephant isn't just recognizing danger, it's calibrating its response to the type of information it has. And then the researchers went further. The Amboseli elephants can also tell the Maasai apart from the Kamba by voice. As soon as an elephant family heard an adult Maasai man speak, the matriarch didn't hesitate. She instantly retreated, silently, already bunching the group into a defensive formation. The voices of Kamba men didn't cause nearly as strong a defensive reaction. The elephants simply didn't consider the Kamba a serious threat. Across 47 elephant families over 2 years of playback tests, the pattern held. Same words, different voice, different response. The elephants were processing language not for meaning, but for identity. They had built a threat library sorted by smell, color, and sound, and they were cross referencing it in real time. Researchers called it the first time it had been experimentally shown that any animal can categorize a single species of potential predator into subclasses based on such subtle cues. Think about what that means. The elephant isn't asking, is this a human? It's asking, which human? And it has three independent ways to answer that question. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable for anyone who's ever walked past a crow and felt like it was watching them a little too carefully. Because it probably was. Crows can remember specific faces for several years after a single encounter. That's been documented. But the mechanism, what's actually happening in the brain when a crow looks at your face, is what makes this one of the more unsettling findings in animal cognition. Dr. John Marsluff and his team at the University of Washington ran experiments where researchers wore different masks while capturing and banding wild crows. When those researchers later returned wearing the same masks, the crows mobbed and scolded anyone in the dangerous mask while ignoring those in neutral masks. They aggressively scolded, mobbed, and dive bombed only the dangerous mask, even when it was worn by a complete stranger 2.5 years later. The face had been separated from the person. The mask was the enemy, and anyone wearing it inherited that status. To understand why this works the way it does, Marsluff's team did something remarkable. They put crows in a brain scanner. During face recognition tasks, crows simultaneously activated their visual processing regions and the parts of their brain associated with emotion and threat assessment. PET scans showed strong activation in what would be their equivalent of the amygdala when they saw dangerous masks. For crows, recognizing a human face is both a visual memory task and an emotional one. That's not a small thing. The amygdala is the part of the mammalian brain that processes fear, the part that fires when something dangerous walks toward you. Crows, which last shared a common ancestor with mammals hundreds of millions of years ago, evolved a completely different brain architecture and arrived at the same functional result. These birds have evolved a different neural pathway for facial recognition that converges on similar capabilities to humans through entirely different brain architecture. But the part that most people don't know, the part that changes the scale of this entirely, is what happens next. The recognition extended beyond the original birds that were captured. The knowledge about dangerous humans spread to other crows who had never been captured themselves. Follow-up studies showed crows maintained these associations for at least 5 years, with the information spreading throughout crow communities across generations. A crow that has never seen your face learns to hate it from a crow that has. The threat travels through the population like a rumor, and it sticks. You can move to Seattle, never harm a crow in your life, and still get scolded by birds reacting to something a relative of theirs experienced years before you arrived. Now, we're about halfway through, and I want to remind you that the animal coming up last is the one that took researchers completely by surprise, because the conditions under which it worked shouldn't have worked. Hold on to that. But first, let's talk about an animal that most people would never put on a list of cognitively sophisticated creatures. An animal with no skeleton, a lifespan of about 3 years, and a brain that's distributed across its arms. An octopus. In 2010, biologist Roland C. Anderson and colleagues at the Seattle Aquarium tested recognition in giant Pacific octopuses in an experiment involving a nice keeper who regularly fed 8 animals and a mean keeper who touched them with a bristly stick. After 2 weeks, all the octopuses behaved differently toward the two keepers, confirming that they can distinguish among individual people even when they wear identical uniforms? Identical uniforms, no visual cues from clothing, no name tags, no distinguishing features beyond the face and body of the person standing in front of them. The octopuses were tracking individuals, and they were doing it without the kind of brain structure we typically associate with that ability. The anecdotal reports had been coming in for years before the formal study. In a lab in New Zealand, an octopus took a dislike to one member of the lab staff for no obvious reason, and whenever that person passed by on the walkway behind the tank, she received a jet of half a gallon of water in the back of her neck. Every time, just her, no one else. The octopus wasn't reacting to all humans. It had singled out one specific person and was consistently, deliberately targeting her. The story from the New England Aquarium is even more specific. An octopus named Truman spent months squirting a particular volunteer every time she came in, not other staff, not visitors. Her. Then she left for college. Months passed. She came back to visit, and Truman soaked her the moment she walked up to the tank. The octopus had stored that individual, held the association across months of absence, and retrieved it instantly on re-encounter. There's no social network here, no flock to learn from, no family memory to tap. The octopus is doing this alone, with a nervous system that looks nothing like ours, in a body that lives for roughly 1,000 days total, and it's spending some of those days nursing a grudge against a specific person. What's the mechanism? We don't fully know. Octopuses likely use a combination of visual cues, face shape, body proportions, movement patterns, but the precision of the targeting suggests something more than a rough match. They're not reacting to humans who look vaguely like her. They're reacting to her. If you work at an aquarium and you're watching this, maybe think about that the next time you walk past the tank. And now the one that researchers genuinely weren't sure was going to hold up. Facial recognition across decades is hard enough for humans. We struggle to recognize childhood friends after 20 years. We lose the fine details, the exact spacing of the eyes, the specific angle of the jaw. Memory degrades. Context shifts. Now add a mask covering the lower half of the face and make it 30 years. A 2024 case study documented two ape species, chimpanzees and bonobos, that consistently recognized a primatologist they had known across a 30-year span. That alone is striking, but the researchers went further. They tested whether the apes could still recognize her when much of her face was covered by a COVID-19 protective mask. And they could. The recognition held. What that tells us is that the eyes may be doing most of the work. When the lower half of the face disappears, the information that matters most, the specific geometry of the eye region, the brow, the upper cheekbones, is still there. And the apes had encoded that information so durably that 3 decades of aging, context change, and physical alteration hadn't erased it. Think about what that requires. A memory system precise enough to hold a specific individual face across 30 years, a recognition process robust enough to work through partial occlusion, and a motivation to run that recognition at all. which means these apes were still treating this person as a known entity, someone worth categorizing, someone whose identity still mattered. That's not a reflex. That's not a simple threat response. That's something that starts to look a lot like a relationship, stored and maintained across time in a way we're only beginning to understand. So here's where we actually are. 4 animals, 4 completely different tools. Elephants using smell, color, and voice to sort humans into threat categories with the precision of a file database. Crows using facial memory, so durable and socially transmissible that the grudge outlives the individuals who formed it. Octopuses, solitary, short-lived, built nothing like us, tracking specific people with a targeting accuracy that has no obvious neurological explanation. And apes holding a face in memory for 30 years, still running recognition through a mask. The question in the title was whether a wild animal can tell friend from foe in a human. The answer is obviously yes, but that's not actually the interesting part. The interesting part is that each of these animals is using a completely different channel to answer the same question, and each of those channels is more precise, more durable, and more sophisticated than most of us ever assumed. The elephant doesn't need to see you. The crow doesn't need to know you personally. The octopus doesn't need a social group to learn from. And the ape doesn't need your face to be fully visible. They've each found a way through using whatever their biology gave them, and the result is a set of abilities that, in some cases, exceed what we can do ourselves. Which means the next time you're near a wild animal and you think it doesn't know who you are, it probably already does. And it figured that out before you got close enough to realize it was paying attention. If this is the kind of thing you find yourself thinking about, there's another video on this channel that goes deep into how animals process fear. Specifically, what happens inside an animal's body in the moments it believes it's about to die, and what actually shifts when a rescue works. It's one of the most watched videos here for a reason. It's linked right now. And if you want to see more like this, subscribing takes 2 seconds, and it actually helps more of these videos reach people who'd want to watch them. Drop a comment with the animal that surprised you most. I'm genuinely curious whether it's the octopus or the crow, because it's almost always one of those two.